me. Everyone can hear me. Oh, hi, Kelly. Hi, I'm Richard.
That's not where that's going to be, is it? It needs to be in the shot.
Is what's going to be?
The mic.
Oh, the mic. Yeah, I'm going to adjust this in a second.
Thank you.
David, where do you want me to put this microphone? I guess you're going to put it next to the tablet because you're going to...
That would be great.
Yeah. Down. Bring over there. There you go. Okay, there we go. David, come, let's make sure this is adjusted correctly.
Hello, Cleveland.
Yes, thanks. I mean, it's perfect. Okay, thanks. Hi. Kim, what number is this? 38?
38.
Okay, this is our 38th Lava Salon. We've got a lot of stuff to do today. We are in the front room now because it's a lot cooler up here than the back room. My felt came Friday, and I tested it with a bed sheet on Wednesday, and the bed sheet worked. I apologize. We'll get it right next time. And at least at one of the felts. Okay. David Boulé is going to talk. He's going to talk about oranges. Where's Brent Walker? Where's Brent?
Probably downstairs.
He's downstairs getting a sandwich. He's going to talk about Charlie Chaplin, Keystone Studios, 2004 Centennial. Was Charlotte here yet? No, but she will be. Charlotte's going to talk about historical mapping overlays, which is going to segue into my Broadway walking tour. We have a lot to do. We have breaks between everything. Where's Jim? Jim, do you want to come up and explain to everyone that you're selling David's book? Just come on up. Come on up. You saw this. This is Jim. Jim is the go-to guy for Angel City Press, David's publisher.
Hi, nice to meet everyone. We hope that after David gives his wonderful presentation that you buy our book, The Orange and the Dream of California. And I think I'm introducing David. There you go.
Good.
Can people hear me if I don't use the microphone?
No.
How's this? Getting better. Getting better? There we go. Okay. Feel free to kindly tell me if you can't hear as we proceed. Thank you, LA Visionaries. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Richard. It's really a thrill to be here. I've been on some of Esoteric's tours, and they're fantastic. I'm sure all of you have indulged yourself in that as well. And so it's a real pleasure to be here. Fred Allen, a star during the golden age of radio, once quipped that California is a fine place to live if you happen to be an orange. 500 years earlier, the Spanish novelist Garcia Rodriguez de Montalvo wrote, "Know ye that on the right hand of the Indies there is an island called California, very close to the terrestrial paradise." And in the 8th century, 500 years earlier still, the Chinese poet Du Fu penned, "In the full spring, on the banks of a river, 2 big gardens planted with thousands of orange trees. Their thick leaves are putting the clouds to shame." The orange and California were destined to make history, and they did. The orange has it all: flamboyant color, exuberant taste, intoxicating flowers, provocative reproduction, endless variety, a global story, and the sweep of history. Cloaked in mystery and available only till the elite until modern times, the orange has been known as the fruit of gods, the food of emperors, a token of gratitude, and a symbol of health, wealth, and love. The orange is the stuff of legends. The ancients believed in the Garden of Hesperides, a grove of immortality-granting golden apples located somewhere on the far western corner of the world, California perhaps. After completing his first 10 labors, Hercules was given 2 more, one of which was to steal fruit from this garden. The golden apples of Hesperides are often portrayed in art as oranges, and in fact, botanists classify all citrus as Hesperidium. The ancestors of all the citrus we love today originated in Southeast Asia. Only moderate changes were required to create our contemporary varieties because citrus mutates readily and hybridizes easily. That citrus was thriving in the Middle East by the 1st century AD as indicated by its prominent depiction on the currency of that era. These bronze coins are from the Jewish war against Rome and feature an image of a type of citron. When Rome fell, the emerging Muslim empire brought additional types of citrus cultivation to the Mediterranean rim. And in the 11th century, the Crusades brought the desire for the orange to Europe. The orange was fast growing a reputation as special, as valuable, and desirable. Not just as a food, but as a symbol. French kings were determined to grow it as a status symbol and an emblem of power. The French climate was not at all suited to orange cultivation, so nobility developed glass-walled, heated buildings called les orangeries just for growing citrus. Louis XIV had the best. At Versailles, he wasn't called the Sun King for nothing. For the next 200 years, oranges would be the exclusive property of the aristocracy and the wealthy. Then, on his second voyage, Columbus brought with him everything needed to establish permanent settlements in the new lands, including seeds for oranges, lemons, and citrons. It wasn't long before oranges and other citrus were growing wild throughout the Caribbean and along the coast of South America. As I mentioned, in the late 15th century, Garcia Rodriguez del Montalvo wrote a novel where the hero visits an island named for Queen Calafia, an imposing Amazon. This is what Carey McWilliams references in his 1949 book, California, the Great Exception, where he notes that there has always been something about California that, quote, incited hyperbole, and that, quote, tricks, deceptions, and wondrous visions went back 500 years and to a time before a single European had even set foot here. Franciscan missionaries arrived in Alta, California in 1769 and built the now fabled chain of missions. These added an architectural sense of place and an easily romanticized lifestyle to the area's already established reputation for a temperate climate and natural abundance. They eventually provided a convenient prehistory onto which many would project their own values and meanings. Beginning in the 1870s, a flood of books, magazine articles, and photographs began portraying California's past, real and imagined. Ramona in 1884 was the first such novel and far and away the most influential, but it was only one of many. The orange, of course, was often a key subject or character in many of these works, and it was equally glorified. In 1885, William Andrew Spaulding wrote, quote, "Orange culture must continue as it began, an industry suited to the most intelligent and refined people." Fantasists, adventurers, those looking to better the world, those looking to better themselves. First-rate artists and first-rate hucksters, the gold rush, the transcontinental railroad, boom and bust real estate, and a growing population and a changing world, they all came together in California. Carey McWilliams summarized this boiling brew when he said, quote, "There is a golden haze over the land, and the dust of gold is in the air." Many others have elaborated on this description of the Golden State, adding the golden nugget, the golden poppy, the golden gate, the black gold of oil, golden sunshine, and golden dreams. And the golden orange was posed to be a symbol of it all. But the real California citrus cornucopia filled slowly. As mentioned, there were no oranges in California before the Padres planted the seeds they had brought with them. Mission San Gabriel holds the honor of having the first sizable grove of oranges. The orchard was modest in size, but the seeds from those trees were the source of much of California's early orange success. It took a transplant, as it often has in California, to see the real promise of the orange in California. William Wolfskill left his home in Kentucky and landed in California in 1831. He planted a 2-acre orchard next to his other crops, but steadily acquired more land and planted more oranges. He recognized the market that the gold rush was creating, and he profited by sending his crop to San Francisco. Wolfskill became the first commercial California orange grower, and by extension, the founder of the California orange industry. The next phase of the orange's economic dominance was jump-started by the completion of the transcontinental railroads. In 1876, William Wolfskill's son, John, arranged for the first carload of California oranges to be shipped to eastern markets. This stereo card image is labeled Southern Pacific Train, 1/2 mile long, loaded with California oranges for the East. A decade later, 2,000 rail cars of citrus were moving east annually, double that in just 5 years later. And this was when the orange was still considered a luxury, affordable only to the wealthy. While the railroads provided the means of getting a growing crop to an expanded market, equally important to the growth of the California citrus empire was the promise it held to construct a healthful, meaningful, satisfying life. In a 1926 travel brochure, it was proclaimed that, quote, "In no other place in America can one find such a thoroughly delightful combination of the best of urban and rural life." Small religious groups, temperance followers, those fighting for suffrage or an end to slavery, along with many believing in less lofty pursuits, were drawn to California with its promises of plenty, perfect weather, and the opportunity to build something new. Many of these newly minted California orchardists knew very little, if anything, about citriculture. Their previous success had been in business and manufacturing and the law. This inexperience became an asset that encouraged them to embrace new ideas when confronted with challenges in irrigation, picking, packing, shipping, and perhaps most importantly, cooperation. By 1915, the industry represented a $200 million investment, and California citrus growers earned 4 times the per capita income of the average American. And by 1920, the California orange crop trailed only oil as the state's largest revenue producer. For the first 100 years of orange cultivation, most California orange orchards were little more than siblings of those very first trees. But by the 1870s, California nurserymen were introducing budded varieties from around the world. The introduction of what became known as the Washington Navel is one of the great California stories, and it altered everything. And this might have never happened if not for a remarkable woman named Eliza Tibbets. Eliza embodied much of what California promised and became. She was curious and a free thinker. She was both of her time and ahead of her time. She was committed to her ideals and full of contradictions. She was a doer and doing her best just to get by. Eliza married 3 times, divorced twice, adopted an African-American child, lived in New York City where she was a practicing spiritualist, marched with Frederick Douglass in 1871 to petition for a woman's right to vote, and attempted with her 3rd husband, Luther, to establish an integrated, egalitarian community in post-Civil War Virginia. That didn't work out. All of this before moving to California. Eliza and Luther were among the early Riverside emigres. When they had previously lived in Washington, D.C., Eliza and Luther had known a superintendent at the United States Department of Agriculture. Eliza wrote him in the early 1870s asking for suggestions on what to plant on their new California property. The superintendent sent them 2 samples of a promising variety of a seedless orange that had been cultivated in Brazil. Eliza and Luther drove their buckboard 3 days from Riverside to Los Angeles to pick up the 2 fragile trees. Eliza is said to have watered them with her dishwater. Fruit from these trees was exhibited in the 1879 Southern California Horticultural Fair, where it won first prize. Soon, the original trees became famous, important, and valuable. Eliza and Luther supported themselves for years by selling cuttings from their 2 trees for $1 apiece. And every single Washington navel orange tree in the world today is a direct, identical descendant of those 2 trees.
Would you repeat that, David? Because that's pretty amazing.
I'd be happy to. Every single Washington navel orange tree in the world today is a direct, identical descendant of those 2 trees around the world. Side note, in the 1930s, a virus attacked the navel trees of that variety in Brazil, where the first trees had come from, wiped out the entire stock of that variety. And it was California orchardists who then sent down rooted trees back to Brazil to replenish their orchards. By the 1904-1905 growing season, 31,422 carloads of Washington navel oranges were shipped out of California, and the second California gold rush had begun. Challenges persisted, however. In the early 1890s, shipping agents changed their policy and began only handling fruit on consignment. All the risk became the growers. California orange growers with previous business experience began to look for solutions. On April 4th, 1893, they organized a meeting of about 100 other orchardists on the second floor of a building at Main and 2nd Streets in downtown Los Angeles, just a handful of blocks from where William Wolfskill had established the very first commercial California orange orchard only 50 years before. The group agreed to pool their fruit, concentrate on quality, and share the expenses of packing and marketing. Remarkably, only one member of this group was an orange grower by profession. By the fall of 1893, the new cooperative organization, the Southern California Fruit Growers Exchange, was up and running, immediately successful in providing its members control and stability over their production and distribution. They soon became the center of California's citrus industry. In 1908, the exchange's pioneer advertising agency, Lord & Thomas, coined a name to use in ad campaigns. A few months later, this name was adopted for use on the exchange's highest quality oranges. That name, of course, is Sunkist. And with that, the California orange was now a brand. Before the California Fruit Growers Exchange and Sunkist, perishable fresh fruit had never been nationally advertised. In 1908, working cooperatively with the Southern Pacific Railroad, a train carrying exclusively California oranges was sent to Iowa. The train was decorated with banners that blared, "Oranges for health, California for wealth." The 3-color ads were run in Iowa newspapers. Copy declared Orange Week and promoted the idea that the California orange was California, a place you'd like to visit, to experience, to live. That year, national citrus sales increased by 17%, not bad. But in Iowa, sales of oranges increased by 50%. All the themes expressed in that very first ad, extraordinary taste, good health, smart parenting, natural purity, and real value, would be repeated and refined many times in Sunkist ads over the decades. The success of making Sunkist synonymous in consumers' minds with the highest quality created a new challenge. Some grocers removed the tissue wrappers with the Sunkist name that covered every single Sunkist orange. To give the tissue wrappers value, it developed a premium program by sending in 12 wrappers at 12 cents. A customer would receive a silver-plated spoon. Soon, Sunkist was flooded with orders for spoons, a staggering total of 5,000 a day. Customers began requesting other pieces, and the exchange responded by offering knives and forks and serving pieces. The California Fruit Growers Exchange Sunkist became the single largest purchaser of silverware in the world by buying 1 million pieces a year between 1912 and 1917. Another dilemma the exchange faced was that it sold oranges by railroad car lots. No one knew what happened to the fruit after the car was unloaded. So beginning in 1904, the exchange built an extensive organization of regional representatives who demonstrated attractive ways to display the fruit. Studying effective fruit selling methods wherever they went, these Sunkist field representatives shared the lessons they learned in illustrated booklets given free to stores. The displays reinforced the idea that Sunkist oranges came from that sunny, beautiful place called California. With California scrub brush being transformed by irrigation into thousands of new acres of orange groves, with the navel ripening in winter and the Valencia in summer, supply soon surpassed demand. The energetic, clever minds at Sunkist again saw opportunity. They invented orange juice. Well, the juice had always been there, of course, but no one was drinking it. 100 years ago, if a person was fortunate enough to have an orange, it was cut in half, often shared, and typically eaten with a spoon. Launched in 1916, the Drink an Orange campaign showed healthy, happy babies, shiny-faced children, doting moms, and confident businessmen starting their day with orange juice. The campaign exceeded all expectations, seeing the average serving size grow from half an orange to 3. Ironically, while the popular consumption of orange juice was invented in California by Sunkist, virtually all the oranges grown for juice today are grown in Florida. But as John McPhee notes, while Florida now grows 3 times as many oranges, California oranges, for their part, can safely be called 3 times as beautiful. In 1952, the California Fruit Growers Exchange changed its name officially to Sunkist Growers, Inc. It had become the most efficient marketing cooperative in the world and developed Sunkist into one of the most successful trademarks in history. To give growers a chance to compete for prizes for both their fruit and displays, regional orange shows were organized early on. The first California citrus-themed fair was held in Riverside in 1879, and this may be an image from that very first show. At the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, the Southern Pacific Railroad brought 73 railroad cars of California fruits and flowers to the exposition, enough to give away over 200,000 oranges on Orange Day. However, by far the biggest and most significant citrus fair began in 1911, the National Orange Show in San Bernardino. From the beginning, the show was part theme park, part trade show, part agricultural exhibition, and part theater. By the early 1920s, attendance had grown to 250,000, and the show featured thousands of oranges fashioned into, quote, a wondrous, enchanting spectacle of gold. By the late 1940s, promotional materials declared that attendance tops the 350,000 mark annually. This is at a time when the entire population of Southern California was under 2 million. So that was quite a success. Billed as California's greatest midwinter event and promoted as national in scope, international in interest, the National Orange Show introduced a new theme every year. Municipalities and commercial groups erected elaborate displays tied to the year's theme. They often featured actors who gave theatrical performances and interacted with spectators. Held in March, the National Orange Show showed off California's mild winter climate and agricultural abundance to the still snowbound rest of the country. In the land of movies, radio, and eventually television, the orange had reached the pinnacle of success. The orange was a star. In a 1903 Scientific American article stated that, quote, ordinarily 1 man to 35 acres is all that is needed. A different opinion was offered in a 1924 issue of Nature magazine. Quote, harvesting the orange crop is often done by organized crews instead of the grower himself. Period descriptions of the skills needed, the number of workers required to maintain an orchard, vary to a disconcerting degree. A large percentage of California orange groves were small, 5 to 10 acres, and were owned and operated as a supplement to the grower's full-time occupation. These growers did not see themselves as farmers, but referred to themselves as horticulturalists and orchardists. They took pleasure in characterizing their efforts in a way characterized by Kevin Starr in his book, California, to amalgamate the genteel tradition and the strenuous life. There was, however, a conspicuous contradiction in the California citricultural idealism. While many people believed in the progressive era ideals of their time, they also had a distinctly provincial worldview. The lofty rhetoric of building virtuous, healthy, high-minded communities did not extend to the inclusion of other cultures, races, or classes. It wasn't particularly greed or mindful self-interest that fostered these views, but an us and them outlook, reflective of the era, that resulted in a sometimes patronizing and often exploitative approach to labor relations. This tension between the need for highly specialized agricultural labor and the challenges of growers has been a central part of California history. The truth is, horticulture was no more virtuous an undertaking than any other type of farming. Citrus grove work was strenuous and constant. Ripe fruit was available to be picked in California all year. Growers learned this quickly and implemented standard practices and began paying workers by the day, not by the box, to encourage careful handling. California citrus labor reflected the social, political, and racial attitudes of the era. Work was often segregated by gender, class, and ethnicity. Religion and class divided jobs between skilled and unskilled workers. Women most often had the job of sorting and carefully packing the fruit. There were hundreds of purpose-built packing houses across Southern California. The packing houses provided large and small growers alike the specialized facilities, machinery, and labor required for preparing their crops for shipping to market. Packing house workers individually wrapped each orange in tissue and packed the crates according to a precise arrangement. Working in the packing houses, women often earned wages equal to those of men. However, despite the great investments of time and money, the losses and failures caused by weather, ignorance, or bad luck, the big ideas that failed, the vast infrastructure required, and most importantly, the enormous amount of skilled, consistent, essential labor that was not often appreciated, treated decently, or even recognized, the poets and pundits of California refused to be swayed and continued to portray California and the life lived there among the oranges as full of beauty, abundance, health, and well-being. Certainly, one of the most impactful and enduring symbols of California's orange empire are the famous crate labels, those fragile pieces of thin paper created only to capture wholesalers' attention. Early citrus labels reflected the personal interests and pride of the pioneer California growers. Among the most frequently appearing images were idealized portrayals featuring manicured orchards, beautiful homes, and snow-capped mountains, all warmed by spectacularly sunny skies. Selling California sold oranges. Commercial printers produced the citrus labels. While citrus labels were usually only a small part of these farms' business, the growers and packers got the benefit of the very talented artists and craftsmen working on larger jobs. As citriculture became more industrialized, the labels became less personal statements and more miniature billboards. Labels became more poster-like with strong graphics that emphasized, rather than daydreams, actual oranges. By the 1950s, the whole industry was evolving. Packing houses were converting to cardboard cartons rather than wooden crates. The marketing value of the labels became negligible, and the last California citrus label was printed in 1955. One of my personal favorite remnants of California's citrus past are the thousands of snapshots taken by people being enchanted by the orchards and the oranges, like this one, postmarked April 15th, 1908. People were amazed that oranges could grow where snow could be seen in the mountains. The photographs speak volumes. People standing by an orange tree, smiles beaming, arms reaching up, grasping a golden orange. Many California photo studios set up orange tree dioramas where tourists could have their portrait taken and get a California souvenir at the same time. This woman wrote on the back of this picture, "My share." One of my favorites is this one. Is this Philip Marlowe? One would think yes, until reading what is written on the back of the photograph. A hard, unemployed, gray-haired, worried, financially embarrassed man views a California orange grove while smoking his last cigarette. Now he builds airplanes for the CAC. Not bad, I hope. That's a short story in 28 words. California was the promised land, and towns were established along railroad routes. Orchards were planted, and a series of land booms with the requisite bus were the result. In 1862, there were about 25,000 orange trees and fewer than 500,000 people in California. With the arrival of the Naval Orange in 1873, the Southern Pacific Railroad in 1876, and the Santa Fe Railroad in 1885, the numbers of both grew at an astounding rate. During this time, Charles Nordhoff wrote, quote, "California, there and only there, the traveler and resident may enjoy the delights of a mild climate, not enervating, but healthful and health restoring." Nordhoff was joined by chambers of commerce, developers, health authorities, hotel owners, but especially the railroads, all gushing with superlatives about California and the promise of the orange. Towns, tourists, and trees were growing in California. The Pacific Electric Railway, or Redcar, was the largest interurban electric railway passenger service in the world in the early 20th century, and residents and tourists could travel on over 1,000 miles of track. And as the car transitioned from a plaything of the rich to a reliable and affordable transportation for many, and as roads improved, the Sunday drive and family excursion became popular pastimes. Well into the 1950s, oranges were still a California tourist draw, although the text in this ad from Holiday magazine also promoted Hollywood and the new Steel and Glass Civic Center. Times were changing. The Orange Empire lasted about a century. World War II brought an end to King Citrus. It offered millions of GIs a chance to see the marvels of California as they cycled through it on their way to and from war. A great many of them came back to live in the state. The war also cemented California's place at the center of the aerospace industry and jump-started other industrial development. The people who were drawn to try their hands at citriculture had a tremendous influence on California and its image. They combined high-mindedness with ambition, conformity with eccentricity. The state continues to draw these kind of people. People looking for, as Kevin Starr has described, quote, a place where human beings might break through the constraints of day-to-day life and come into possession of something immeasurably better. In 1870, a California grower said, quote, people tell large stories about oranges, but the truth is big enough. That truth shaped California in ways significant and frivolous, and the orange became, and continues to be, a beautiful, tasty, healthy symbol of both the fantasy and the substance of California. In closing, I want to read to you from an article entitled Paradise that appeared in the 1882 issue of Harper's Magazine. The orange grove is lovely at all times. It has a mysterious air when the long alleys are dark against the red of sunset. At twilight, the fruit glimmers on its boughs like a feast of lanterns not yet fully lit. In the free, pleasant mornings, we watch the sparkle of the yellow globes among the glossy, dark leaves, and catch, perhaps, the perfume of some few blossoms heralding in a new crop while the last still hangs. So thank you again for coming. Thank you, Richard and Kim, and now I'll answer any questions you might have.
I'm sorry. You can ask your question without being phoned.
You mentioned differences in religion and gender in terms of how jobs were assigned. Can you tell us a little bit more about the religious differences between different types of jobs?
I'm not a authority on late 19th century, early 20th century, but I think we all know that with waves of immigrants, each wave of immigrants faced new kinds of prejudice. Irish Catholics, Jews, Italians, Mexicans, Filipinos, Asians. You know, in the late 1880s, there was the Chinese Exclusionary Act and the Chinese, I forget the exact title, but it prohibited, if you were a Chinese... Was it? Yeah, if you were here as a Chinese, as a person who had immigrated from China, working, and you wanted to go back to visit your family, by law you were not allowed to come back into the country. So I like to think that as a country, as a society, as a culture, we've made significant progress, but of course it's still a work in progress.
Did tissues help with preserving the oranges during shipment, or is it just marketing?
Yes, originally they were one of the earliest.
Could you repeat the question, please?
I wanted to know if the tissues...
Oh, no, if he could, because he's on the mic, yeah. You, I heard.
The question was, were the tissues marketing, or did they help with the transportation of the oranges? And the answer is that they started as one of the early ways to get fresh fruit successfully traveled over several thousand miles and many weeks of travel. I think it helped with moisture and bruising and so on. Yes, sir?
When was the refrigerated rail car introduced?
In the 1880s. Well, actually, it first started with cars that had ice that kept things cold. Then later, there was mechanical refrigeration. Yes, sir?
You mentioned a little the advantage of a navel orange compared to Valencia or previous oranges.
Well, the question is the difference between Valencia oranges and navel oranges. Citrus, like most plants that have a lot of varieties, different varieties are better adapted to different environments. That's why Florida grows so many grows most of the trees for juice, because that particular variety is suited for that environment. The superintendent from the Department of Agriculture, who sent the 2 trees to Eliza Tibbetts, also sent 2 identical trees to Florida where they promptly died. They just weren't suited to that environment. But specifically to your question, Washington Navels fruit in the winter, Valencias in the summer. Washington Navels are larger, easy to peel, seedless. That's why they have to be budded. Valencias Washingtons grew best along the foothills in the San Bernardino area, Riverside area, whereas Valencias grew better on the flatlands, so San Fernando Valley, Orange County, and so on. Yes?
I was wondering, do you know the location of some of the landscape photos you showed?
The question is, do I know the location of some of the landscape photos? I know some, but not all. The picture on the cover of my book is Porterville, which is up by Exeter, along the central, the San Joaquin Valley, along the Sierra Nevadas. The picture of the 2 men looking out over the vista of orange groves, that's Mount Rubidoux in Riverside. Yes, sir.
Does the original orange tree still exist in southeast China? The original orange in southeast China, does that still exist?
One of the 2 of the original navel orange trees does exist. It's in Riverside on Arlington Avenue. The second tree was transplanted by Teddy Roosevelt to the front of the Mission Inn in 1903, 1908, and it died a couple years later.
No, but I mean in China.
Oh, in China. There's still citrus here in China. In fact, many of the earliest Chinese laborers, citrus laborers, had direct citriculture experience in China. They knew more about growing oranges than the people who owned the orange fields. I think that's it. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Kim.
David, you did it. Thank you. I'll get you some water in a second. We have, let's see, it's 12:45. Very good. Where's Brent? Okay. We're going to take a 15-minute break. David, please go stand by your books next to Jim.
And my book will be available too, Richard. You
Yes.
could mention that.
I'm going to mention that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so David, go stand by your book. Okay, I have 12:45. We're going to come back in 15 minutes. Brent, you're going to talk about Charlie Chaplin, Keystone Studios, and the Centennial. We're going to set up the DVD player, and we'll switch back and forth between a slideshow and some DVDs. Kim, your book, your detective novel, which you just published, you have out. Where is your book?
I'll be over there too.
Oh, it's right next to David's book. Okay, good. So everyone go order some food if you want. They can bring food up here, so if you just put an order in, they'll come up, and we'll see you back in 15 minutes. Thank you so much.